Hello everyone. Good morning. I understand it's 8:30, right? But I'm here to supercharge you. Hope you had your morning coffee today. So let's get started. Welcome to XNT203, Supercharge your SQL Server workload featuring Thomson Reuters. But before we get started, let's try to know each other real quick. Raise your hand if you have applications running on top of SQL Server. Wow, that's a good number. That also tells me that you are in the right session. Now raise your hand if you are running them on AWS. Wow, we love our customers. One last thing, this is the most important question. Raise your both hands if you love to save some money. Okay, so no, keep it right there. Let's do a little bit of stretching from here. Left to right, right to left, let the blood flow. Awesome. Now I'm feeling charged, right? My name is Pradeep Bagchi. I'm a senior solution architect with AWS. I have with me Nitin Shivani, Director of IT, Thomson Reuters, Yogi Barot, Tech Lead, Microsoft Workload, AWS. Three of us today we are going to share how not just run, but how you can supercharge your SQL Server workload with operational efficiency and in a cost-optimized way. So let's look into our agenda today. First, I'm going to share why customers are selecting AWS as their preferred cloud to run SQL Server workload. Then I'll share what are the different pathways you have to move them over to AWS. Then I will uncover some post-migration challenges that I often hear from my customer. Then Nitin is going to share his cloud journey with one of the most business-critical applications that he manages. And then finally, Yogi will wrap the session with some tips and tricks on how to operationalize your SQL Server workload on AWS. So now let's find out the why. Why customers are selecting AWS as their preferred cloud to run their SQL Server workload. First is the lower total cost of ownership. You know, cost is always a conversation starter. You can achieve significant cost saving both from infrastructure as well as licensing standpoint. You can typically save up to 45% on SQL Server license and up to 77% on Windows Server license when you are running them on AWS. Then is higher performance and reliability. You can achieve and realize 98% reduction in unplanned downtime when you are running your SQL Server workload on AWS. At the same time, your developer can realize 26% boost in their developer productivity. Your deployment is going to run 71% faster. We do have flexible licensing option. You have two choices to make here. You can bring your own license to utilize your existing investment, or else you can pay as you go with our license included model and break free from the license management and compliance management. We have simple, easy to use, integrated experience to build and run your SQL Server workload. We have features like AWS Launch Wizard for SQL Server, where you can actually get guided experience to pick your sizing option, configuration options, and deploy your SQL Server workload. And this is very good for the DBAs and the developers started using AWS for the first time. We have the most experience running Microsoft workload on the cloud. We have been running SQL Server workload for over 16 years, longer than any other cloud providers. You know what? I was reading an article a couple of weeks back, published by IDC InfoBrief, where they have mentioned 52% of the customer prefers to run their SQL Server workload on AWS. That is more than next 6 cloud provider combined. And last but not the least, we open door for the future modernization. Once you start moving your workload on AWS, you can modernize to any of our purpose-built databases. And then you can break free from doing activities like license management, patch management, taking backups and provisioning, and invest the time to fuel your innovation with data and AI. Now you know why. Let's find out how. What are the different options you have? We have various options, like from self-managed EC2 to fully managed Amazon relational database services. which we call Amazon RDS. We ensure to meet you where you are at, no matter where you are in your cloud journey. So on the one side, we have option to lift and shift your SQL Server workload to Amazon EC2, one of the most proven, reliable, and the secure cloud to run your SQL Server workload. Many customers prefers that because it's the simple and the easiest way to move your SQL Server workload. My customer Thomson Reuters, when they were making their data center exit decision, it was a critical time-sensitive process for them. They decided to move their workload to Amazon EC2 instance primarily because they wanted to move to AWS as fast as possible. And then at the same time, they wanted to utilize their existing license investment. On top of that, their developers and DBAs were fully familiar with the SQL Server experience. So the choice was very clear for them. And at the same time, they needed the operating system level access. So they decided to move their SQL Server workload and started running them on Amazon EC2 instance. On the other side, many customers prefers to refactor their SQL Server workload to one of our cloud-native purpose-built databases. Let me be very honest with you. Though refactoring will give you the most value of the cloud, it takes time. That's why many customers prefers to re-platform their SQL Server workload to our managed services like Amazon Relational Database Services for SQL Server or Amazon RDS for SQL Server Custom, Amazon Relational Database Services Custom for SQL Server, I'm sorry. But at the end of the day, moving from the self-managed model to a fully managed services will help you to eliminate activities like taking backup, provisioning, as well as patch management. And you can break free from those and invest that time that matters to your business most. So we'll be focusing more on re-platforming today. But now let's look into some post-production challenges. As soon as customers start running their SQL Server workload on Amazon EC2 instances, I hear post-production challenges from them. And I was able to broadly classify them or categorize them into 4 categories. Number 1 is the cost management. Though we offer various tools and features, but controlling SQL Server cost on cloud is not an easy thing to do. The pay-as-you-go model for storage and compute, along with the over-provisioning tendency to ensure performance, adds your database expense at the same time is difficult to manage. Second is the unfriendly and punitive licensing terms that's coming from commercial database providers. And at the same time, you need to deal with the end-of-support challenges. For example, Microsoft announced, I think this summer, that they're no longer going to support SQL Server 2014. If you are running SQL Server 2014 in one of your production or non-production environment, I'm sure that you're probably dealing with this end-of-support challenge. Next is the scalability and the operational resilience. You need to design your workload so that they are highly available across different availability zones. Or you need to also design your disaster recovery strategies across different regions. Though we offer various tools and service, but at the end of the day, you need to integrate them with your existing application so that you can ensure the RTO and RPO requirement that you promise to your customer. And that's not an easy task to do. And the last but not the least is the patch management. Now, that adds significant amount of undifferentiated heavy lifting for your IT operations. Though you can automate most of them, but at the same time, even after automation, you need to continuously be vigilant and you need to ensure that you have a proper plan and execution strategy so that your database, as well as your host, which is the EC2 instance in this case, are fully up to date with the security fixes and the performance patches. My customer, Thomson Reuters, faced all of these post-production challenges as soon as they started running their SQL Server workload on AWS. So I think this is the perfect time for me to welcome Nitin Shivani, where he is going to share his cloud journey with one of the most business critical applications that he manages. Please welcome Nitin Shivani.
Thanks, Pradeep. Good morning, everyone.
Okay.
Good morning. Well, that's amazing. Thanks for the feedback. I have a question for all of you over here. How many of you are here for the very first time at the reInvent? Please raise your hands. Wow, that's a good number. You share something common with me. It's my first time at reInvent as well. Well, it's my first time in Vegas, and it's amazing. What an amazing morning it is. So let me first thank everybody who's present here. Let me thank those who are watching me online, specifically my colleagues at Thomson Reuters and those who are present here from Thomson Reuters. Thank you. Without much ado, let's jump into this exciting journey, which I'm going to talk about and talk to you through this process here. Right. Before we begin, let me introduce myself and my organization. Right. My name is Nitin Shivani. I'm the Director of Technology within the Product Engineering function. Now, I'm leading a group of architects. My primary focus is AWS migration, modernization, and the new norm, generative AI initiatives. So at Thomson Reuters, we clarify the complex, help professionals know today and navigate tomorrow. And the way we are able to do this is with the help of technology and innovation, advanced AI, industry-leading insights, and so on. As you can see, we are driven by a very strong vision. Being a data-driven organization, it's crucial for us to retrieve and get the answers faster in a secured and scalable way. Now, I'm going to talk about one of the mission-critical applications within Thomson Reuters, known as OneSource Global Trade Platform. So what is OneSource Global Trade Platform? Let me explain to you in simple words. It allows companies to minimize duty exposure, helps them optimize their supply chain portfolio, and also helps them to be prepared and anticipate any changes that happens in the international regulations. Now, the platform itself supports plethora of product offerings, as you can see, whether it be global classification, denied party screening, import-export management, you name it, and we have it. Now, let's take a look at the platform by numbers, and this is crucial for everyone here because that'll help you understand the scale at which we operate, right? The robust infrastructure supports 100+ application servers and database servers that we are running. Now, this is huge, right? This is for high performance, scalability, and reliability. The platform holds 100 terabytes of customer data. Now, this is important transaction, trade, and compliance data. Now, this is critical, and we are in a serious business, right? The platform supports over 2 million transactions per minute, which essentially means that we have a lot of massive data flow constantly in real time. We have built the platform to support 60 minutes of recovery time objective and recovery point objective. We are resilient, and it's a necessity. So let's speak about next 20 minutes about this massive architecture here. Are you ready for the next 20 minutes? Well, I think it's not going to take 20 minutes. I have a very simpler version for you, which is going to talk about the backend database architecture. Now, think about this as one cluster, and we have several such clusters. As Thomson Reuters, as an organization, we adopted a very simple strategy to lift and shift customer workloads from on-prem to AWS, right? Essentially, rehosting. As you can see, the customer data from on-premises is backed up and restored securely via AWS Storage Gateway over to Amazon EC2 instance, where our SQL Server is running. You would also be able to see that we have used a third-party software solution for replicating data synchronously within the availability zone and asynchronously across the region. So we are definitely highly available and resilient. The third party also uses Amazon FSx for Windows. This is basically to maintain the quorum. Now, there is a native backup strategy that we adopted, wherein we are storing the customer's full backup on EBS volume, and then we are running processes to shift that to S3 bucket, which is again cross-region replicated. Now, let's take a look at why is the primary focus on the backend databases. Most importantly, deployment and scale perspective, we have 100+ database instances, and each instance hosts around 50 to 60 customer data. Now that's massive. At the same time, we have a large user base, which essentially means we have large volume of transactions flowing through in real time. So we need to be stable, right? Any mishap would lead to negative impact on the business operations. As such, it'll impact our customers and Thomson Reuters. Now, since we have multiple instances running across, data integrity and consistency is always a challenge. And SQL Server has been an amazing tool to help us in this case. Now, from performance perspective, we have comprehensive suites of monitoring and management tools, which helps in maintaining the database and optimizing it. Now, as an organization, Thomson Reuters is growing, so are our customers and their data, which essentially means we are planning for scale and resilience in order to fit the customer needs or future-proof ourselves. Now, considering the sensitive nature of our data, security is our top priority. Our database infrastructure has several robust security measures which help in protecting our underlying valuable data assets. With 2 million transactions per minute, adhering to RTO, RPO requirements is absolutely essential, and we are resilient. Now, my friends here from AWS actually taught me something very important. Everything fails all the time, right? And as such, we had challenges as well. So the next 2 slides I'm going to talk about are pre-production, lower environment challenges, as well as the post-production challenges. The first thing that we faced while we were trying to do failover testing was data corruption. Now, this stemmed from the third-party replication software that we are using, and our teams did a due diligence here and contacted the vendor to kind of help that solve. But it was actually impacting the integrity of disaster recovery processes that we had in place. Now, the scale at which we operate, SQL Server patching becomes extremely challenging. It also essentially means that we need to be updating our systems with top-notch security patches so that we are safe, but it's time-consuming as well. With multiple databases running on the instance, every single database has its own performance characteristics and unique requirements, right? So you'd have a lot of databases running within the same instance. The challenges do not stop here. We had post-production challenges as well, and one of them you can easily guess is the cost, right? So from cost perspective, as I was talking about earlier, that we had a third-party solution for data replication, which adds to our licensing cost. We had the native backup strategy where we are storing the backups on EBS and then shifting over to S3. But that, again, affects our cost portfolio. At the same time, we had post-production challenges related to operational excellence as well. EC2 Windows patching and SQL Server patching is not an easy task. It is definitely resource intensive, and it has to be meticulously planned so that we do not disrupt the operations. At the same time, storing the backup on EBS volumes is time-consuming activity as well. So let me talk about how a small change in our architecture literally helped us solve a lot of challenges that we are facing. A few slides back, I was talking about how we had rehosted our customer data, right? Over EC2 instance, we are using the third-party software solution for replicating, and then we had a native backup strategy for moving the data across the region. So here is how we resolved some of our challenges. Instead of rehosting, we just re-platformed our workload using RDS custom. There are 3 key pieces to this architecture so that it will help you understand the benefits of this architecture. One being the failover, right? We have a failover from one AZ or primary node to the replica. Then we have synchronization of data across the AZs, and using cross region snapshot copy, we can actually move the data from one region to the other. So here are the benefits that you'd see. First and foremost, from cost optimization perspective, there is no more third-party licensing software that we need to use for data replication. We have an out-of-box solution available. We don't have to even use the backup and restore strategy that I was talking about using the EBS volumes. RDS Custom again supports that. There is no need of manually updating our fleet of instances. We have an out-of-box solution that RDS Custom provides, and it's no more a headache from my side. It's definitely AWS team that's going to handle that. One important part of this benefit that I want to highlight is within Thomson Reuters, we have a corporate security approved golden images, which we can now bring it all together into this platform in RDS Custom. And that's a great feature because there are custom updates done on the AMIs, which I really want to move over to AWS, and that's the feature that can be supported by RDS Custom. So I would like to thank my AWS members here, Pradeep and Yogi, to give us the operational excellence that we were looking forward to. And I call Yogi to talk about how to operationalize the SQL Server workload on AWS. Thank you.
Thanks, Nitin, for walking through Thomson Reuters architecture, existing architecture, and some of the challenges that I'm sure many of you might be facing that right now as well, right? So the goal is how we helped operationalize SQL Server workload on AWS and overcome some of the challenges. So let's talk about that. So as Pradeep mentioned earlier, for running SQL Server, we have choice like running on EC2 lift and shift. That's what most of the customer does. And that same thing Nitin's team did as well, right? So they just migrated, running out of data center, tight deadline, licensing investment, new to cloud, let's just put on EC2. Running on EC2 is like a virtual machine experience, right? So you don't feel any difference from application point of view. It's like different endpoint you just connect, and it makes it much easier. But overall, when we look at the customer point of view, at the end, like how many years been running? Like more than 2 years, right? So Nitin has been running this application for more than 2 years. So after some time, they think to move to the managed service, right? With looking at some of the challenges. So with Amazon RDS for SQL Server, there are less sharp edges because it's a managed service. You can get your managed patching, managed backup, automated monitoring, automated multi-AZ with high availability. At the same time, you can have automatic scaling as well. So while RDS SQL Server provides you such a great benefits, there are some edge cases there your application might hit that limitation. Because being a managed service, there are some limitation. One of them I can say, using an SA rights. How many of you has logged in as an sysadmin, right? We always log in as sysadmin. That's how we always used to with SQL Server, right? But first thing we hit is, oh, we cannot log in as an SA, right? Or maybe if we have more than 100 database on the server, we cannot bring that to RDS SQL Server. Or if you have existing investment like licensing, and if you want to do BYOL, you can't do that for RDS SQL Server. Or some of the third-party application that you want to run, they would say, sorry, we can't run on RDS SQL Server, so they're not certified. So if we hit all these kind of challenges, there is a middle solution which is the best of both worlds. With RDS Custom for SQL Server, it's still a managed service, so backup, patching, automation, monitoring, multi-AZ, high availability, still there. At the same time, you get an EC2 Lite experience, like you get an SA right, and you can RDP to it, just like a remote desktop, log in and then check your disk space or things like that. So it makes it much easier to get that same experience, at the same time, more sharp edges. So around the same time, reInvent 2021 was the first time Amazon RDS Custom for SQL Server was announced. And we look based on the customer requirement, those customers who are previously unable to migrate to RDS, now they can still go to the managed service using RDS Custom. So it's still a managed experience. At the same time, you get a lot of flexibility. Flexibility to bring your own media. Yeah, Pradeep mentioned about BYOL, but this BYOL, when it comes to RDS Custom, it's called BYOM, because actually you are bringing your media, SQL Server installation media, as well as the license onto EC2 instance. So you can use your own Active Directory, whether it's an on-premise or on AWS. You can also install third-party agent, such as like you have a monitoring software like Datadog, or maybe Redget monitoring, or any other backup software, and your company has a mandate to only use those. Now with RDS Custom, you can bring all that on and you can install. So the way we make it happen, we call it an automation mode. Because it's a managed service, we need to make sure that customer can make the customization, like alter the environment, but within a time frame. So the way we suggest is you take a snapshot, then you pause the automation. When you pause the automation, any monitoring that AWS does is paused for that instance. And you make the updates, like you installed a custom driver, you installed an agent, or add an attached additional EBS volumes, make some SQL config change, and then you resume the automation. The only thing, you have up to 24-hour maximum to finish this customization. You cannot pause your automation for more than 24 hours, otherwise it will be in compliance. So that with this limitation and gives you flexibility, at the same time, you can get what you want. Same thing as a granular control. Like if you are looking to have SQL CLR, for example, .NET code running in a SQL Server installed onto the RDS Custom, it's possible. If you are looking for IDP rights, SA rights, or maybe having a fine-grained access control, everything is like, even the resource management, resource governance, that's all supported on RDS Custom for SQL Server. And lastly, lift and shift. Some applications that they said, oh, we want to just migrate as it is without having much changes, because with RDS SQL Server, you might need to modify certain code or the way the backup works, the restore works, there are some managed services store procedure. With RDS Custom, at least you can do lift and shift migration to SQL Server as it is. Also, it allows you a minimum downtime based on your migration method as well. Now let's talk about some of the use case. You might be thinking, is this the right use case for me? I don't know, should I go for RDS SQL Server or RDS Custom? What is difference for me? So this is how we can check. Like if you want a granular control, if you are looking to install custom driver, XP command shell, if you have a PowerShell script using XP command shell, I always use like XP command shell for so many years, right? So if you have those kind of an automation administrative scripts, if you still want to continue running, you can run that using RDS Custom. Second thing is, there are certain third-party application, packaged application, like COTS, commercial out of this cells application. And if that application you want to bring onto AWS, sometimes they said, oh, we don't certify to run on RDS SQL Server, like Microsoft SharePoint, CRM, Microsoft Dynamics. Now you can run that on RDS Custom. So that's another use case. And lastly, if you are looking to migrate using an always-on availability group cluster, right? If you have an HA setup on-premise using always-on, if you want to migrate using the same option, now with RDS Custom, you can do that as well. We'll cover that more in detail into upcoming slide. So looking at Nitin's example, their use case was they need a granular control, because they wanted to install some custom monitoring software. They had an application where they wanted to bring the custom AMI. They wanted to do BYOL as well. So let's talk about RDS Custom overall architecture, right? And how this architecture helped meet Nitin's requirement. One of the things he mentioned about security is very important for Thomson Reuters. Not only important for our customers, it's also important for us. Security is job zero at AWS, right? So the way RDS Custom works, it's deployed right into your VPC. So you get all security benefit, like additional layer of isolation, because it's running inside your environment itself. So it's running underneath on EC2 instance. It has an instance profile, EBS volume, and EC2 instance. On top of it, it has an additional services that you integrate your SQL Server with. So to support the customization which I mentioned earlier, like monitoring, automation, pausing, resuming, we need to have some agent installed. So we have a CloudWatch agent. So CloudWatch agent will do the monitoring with using Amazon CloudWatch. Then we have AWS System Manager agent. So AWS System Manager agent will help you with the patching, automation, run the scripts, things like that. And we have our own mini agent that will help checking this automation, whether it breaks or not. So we have this multiple agent installed on the server. You are not allowed to stop this agent. If you stop these agents, your RDS custom will be out of support, right? Together, these architectures will give you the seamless and managed experience together with the flexibility that you require. Now let's talk about licensing. I know Pradeep mentioned about BYOL and BYOM. With RDS Custom, the way BYOM works is if you have made heavy investment into licensing, tell me about how much SQL Server Standard Edition cost. It's around $7,000 per 2 core. SQL Server license is always in terms of 2 vCPU, right? So 2 vCPU is 7,000 USD approximately. And minimum you need to license is 4 vCPU. It's around 15,000 something standard edition. And if you go for enterprise edition, it's like more than 50% or 60%, depends on the version as well, right? So you are heavily investing in your licensing, especially looked at the Thomson Reuters situation, like they had hundreds of servers. Imagine how much of licensing investment they would have done, SQL Standard and enterprise mix. So the existing investment, we don't want you to get wasted. We want you to utilize that and save cost. So with RDS Custom, still manage experience and bring that license. Now, tip number 1. Tip number 1 to save cost is using a developer edition for your non-production environment. Anyone knows how much developer edition cost? 0, it's for free, yes, and it has the same feature as Enterprise Edition. So you get the full feature as of Enterprise Edition with 0 cost. Typically, every production has a 3 non-production environment. Non-production is like development, QA, UAT, staging, right? So all of this non-production you can run for free on EC2 as well as on RDS Custom. So with BYOM model, you can bring your developer edition for free as well. So that is tip number 1. Make sure you check it out with your architect and use this developer edition benefit to save some cost. And second option is if you don't have any licensing, if you are just brand new building new application, you can use a license included instance as well and pay as you go based on your need. Now, how does this BYOM works? So let me start with SQL running on EC2. So you guys are running SQL on EC2. Can I ask you which instance you are running? R5, R6, R7, right? Those memory optimized instance. So SQL Server is generally memory hungry. It will take whatever memory you give it until the size of the database is reached. So if you have 1 terabyte of database, it will take the whole 1 terabyte of memory and put whole database in the memory. SQL is memory hungry, but you need to find the right balance of how much memory you need and how much you actually use it. There are some ways to check it out, maybe check the page life expectancy to find out how long the page stays in the memory and to actually find out the right combination. So check out our latest instance, which is X2IEDN. That is the one which has 1 CPU to 32 gig of memory. And every time I talk to customer, I make sure I bring up this instance type. So tip number 2 for SQL Server, get the memory optimized instance. I think with Nitin's case and the broader Thomson Reuters group, I also help bring on the right instance to save them cost because SQL is paid for the CPU basis. If you are using more CPU, less memory, then you are paying more for licensing. Even if you are BYOL, you still need to bring more licensing, right? So that is a tip number 2, is make sure you use the right instance to balance your requirement. So the way it works you have EC2 instance, you bring your media on EC2 instance, and you create a CVE, so custom version engine. So once you create the CVE, then CVE is basically like a binary digital snapshot of your database as well as AMI. So once you create that, you can launch your RDS custom using this CEV. Now let's talk about high availability. This is one of the features that I am passionate about using RDS and RDS custom both. The reason why, let me tell you a story. I've been DBA from, I'm from Canada, by the way, and I've been DBA for 20 plus years. So when I was DBA at one point in time, 2012, I had a customer, I was working for a customer, their main office is in Los Angeles and another office is in Burbank. There are 2 data centers. Sitting in Toronto, I need to manage those 2 data center SQL Server replicas in sync. And at that time, SQL Server always on availability group was introduced. So I had to set up that. So it was kind of a nightmare for me to set up, monitor, manage, make sure the replicas are in sync. And at that time, the network was not that stable as these days, right? This is talking about 12 years ago. And things break. I got the pager at night, and 50% of my day I was just spending in managing the high availability of SQL Server. At least with RDS Custom and RDS SQL Server, that headache is gone now. You just do single click, and it will give you single click high availability. So the way it works, it doesn't use always on availability group actually. With RDS Custom, it does the block level replication. So any changes on your primary get replicated to secondary at the block level. So it does asynchronous replication with multi-AZ setup. And as Pradeep mentioned in their architecture, you can also do the cross-region snapshot for DR purpose, something like that. But with this high availability feature, like you don't need to worry about automatic failover. Let's see how exactly it works, okay? So when you select, let's say you provision RDS custom, click on the multi-AZ. What it does in the background, you have primary DB with the EBS storage. You have a secondary DB with another EBS storage. Now your reads are happening to primary, writes are happening to primary only, and in the back end, it's doing a synchronous replication, a block level replication to secondary EBS volume. At this point, everything is working fine. Now, say, what did you say, Nitin? Things are always failing all the time, and we need to design for that. So let's say something happened, and either a compute level or a storage level, something broke. And at that time, it determined that, oh, now I need to activate my secondary EBS volume as a read-write volume. It will activate as a read-write volume, change SQL Server database services to point to this volume, activate the SQL Server services as a primary, and point your application failover to the primary and point your application over there. And all of this will happen between 30 to 60 seconds, right? So you get your high availability built in without need to worry about anything. So that's how the multi-AZ works actually. Now let's talk about second challenge, which Nitin mentioned about backup. Backup is a #1 task that DBS has to manage. Doesn't matter it's a managed service or is a manual service or EC2 or RDS, DBS still need to think about backups. If you are managing one database, that's fine. You can back up to native backup or maybe server level backup, snapshot or individual DB backups. But think about the scale that Thomson Reuters has. Like they had like hundreds of database, hundreds of servers with hundreds of terabytes of data. In that case, if you are putting your backup to EBS volume, which they were before I met them, they were putting this to EBS volume and storing this for X number of days. Typically, customers say stores for 7 days or maybe goes up to 30 days based on the retention period. So 100 terabyte, even if a compressed backup, let's say 60% compression, 600 gig, storing that, not 600 gig, 600, yeah, storing that for X number of days, right? Now, how much it's going to cost you? Think about that, right? So that was an additional layer of cost which they did not realize is adding up to overall SQL Server cost. And at the end, you need to manage that backup to S3. So you have additional automation to put that backups to S3 as well. So this was all adding up as an administrative overhead for this many servers. So how did I help them? I suggested them to use an AWS storage gateway. So AWS storage gateway has a multiple components, and one of them is called file gateway. When you use a file gateway with the file share, the way it works, it's like an SMB share that you can map / network drive, right? You can map that to your EC2 instance, and that way you can have your backup. DBS can now directly back up to this SMB share. That means DBS can directly back up to S3 using storage gateway file share. With this option, we have done our internal benchmark, and with these options, you can get most cost savings for your backup. It's like most high performing backup. At the same time, for restoration time is the fastest way to restore. So overall, the backup can go on to EBS, it can go to FSX, you can use FSX NetApp as well, it can go to S3 as well, it can go to storage gateway. The storage gateway was the options if you are using SQL 2022 below. Now if you are using SQL 2022, you have an additional option to back up directly to the S3. Have you guys heard about SQL Server 2025? Yeah, the preview was just announced, I think, a couple of weeks back. I haven't myself tested. I'm going to try it out in the next couple of months. But if you are using SQL 2022 and above, now we have a feature in Microsoft SQL Server itself to do backup directly to S3. So that way, you have the most cost efficient option, 50% even time reduction for backup. It's so fast. It's going directly to S3. Just check out that as well. Now let's talk about migration options. So with migration options, you can do multiple ways to migrate your SQL Server database, backup restores, AWS database migration service, SQL replication, as well as always-on availability group. I'm not going to talk about all these options today. We'll just cover the two options over here. If you want to learn more about migrating SQL Server to AWS, including RDS custom and EC2, I do have a session this afternoon, 4 p.m. at MGN. Check it out, join that session if you want to learn more about just the migration and to uncover your architecture situation as well. Let's talk about the migrating RDS custom using backup and restore. So backup and restore, the way it's listed as #1 option, in fact, this is #1 option used by all of you, used by most of our customer. The reason, it's straightforward, it's flexible, DBAs are used to using these options, and it's been working fine. It provides you a consistency and integrity with your database, so no other issues like corruption or things like that. It gives you like a full database level backup. You can do full backup, differential backup, and the series of transaction log backup, restore the full backup with no recovery, restore the differential backup with no recovery, and apply the transaction logs and latest transaction log with recovery. So with these options, you can go up to minutes of cutover, depends on the transaction log backup frequency. So this option works for SQL Server on EC2, it works for RDS, it works for RDS custom as well, right? So that was one of the options I think Thomson Reuters also selected to migrate their database to AWS when first time they migrated to EC2 as well as to RDS custom as well. Now let's look at the second option. So if you have made, and how many of you are using an always-on availability group right now? Okay, so you are familiar with the always-on AG concept. So always-on AG works clusterless or with cluster using Windows failover cluster service. So if you have this already set up on premises or on EC2 using 2 EC2 instance or 2 servers with high availability, you can extend one more replica using SQL Server distributed availability group, and you can replicate that to AWS. So this third replica will be asynchronous replication. So you are on premises, your SQL on RDS custom here, and that will be asynchronous replication, provided you have a networking setup between on-premises and AWS. So with this setup, the way it works, you can start the replication, wait for the both replicas to be in sync, keep it running for X number of days, months. When you are ready to cut over, you can simply switch over the replicas, right? So there is no migration effort because your replicas are already in sync. So this option will give you minimum downtime, and without having more disturbance to the business operations, it can happen the migration quickly. Now, any questions before I go to the summarization? I would like to call out about 3 main tips I mentioned here. So number 1 tip was use and developer edition. Second one was use an X2I EDN, use a memory optimized instance. And the third one for the backup to the storage gateway. So those 3 tips I have. Check out with us if you need more tips for SQL operationalization. But I'm going to pass it to Pradeep to cover the overall outcome for Thomson Reuters based on our operational efficiencies guidance.
Thank you, Yogi. Everybody loves data and numbers, right? Thank you, Yogi, for awesome tips and tricks. I really liked the way she mentioned about the SQL Server developer editions. So that's basically free of cost for you to run your lower non-production environments. But if you look into the numbers on the slide, that speaks everything that we are talking for last 40-45 minutes. Thomson Reuters is able to save 40% in overall reduction of their operating expenses. And at the same time, they are able to achieve 5x operational efficiency. That means the things that they are doing for over a couple of weeks that they do now in over a couple of days. That's a significant improvement in terms of efficiency. The most important thing, they got the best of the both worlds. The developers, they got the database experience. At the same time, their DBAs, they got the underlying operating system access, which is critical, as I mentioned at the beginning, for their application to manage. So if you have this requirement, like you need have a best of both worlds, definitely RDS Custom is an option for you. So let me also share a couple of links here that you can scan using this keyword code to study further about different options that you have to run your database workload on AWS. And with that, we thank you all, and thank you for attending our session. They can reach out to us offline. That's our contact.
This is our contact information. My email is yogibar@amazon.com as well, and you can reach out to us through email later on for any other questions that you want. We'll be happy to help you with your need. And thank you for joining, and have a nice day, and have a wonderful reInvent. Hopefully you will enjoy in Las Vegas. Thank you.
Thank you.